Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, sharing some further reflections and insights for you guys. And today I'm going to continue on with relationship astrology, and the technique that I will be working with is Synastry astrology. Now, I did a video just not too long ago on Synastry, and I showed you guys a particular technique when you're drafting the Synastry grid between two people, and so I won't go into that. Just watch the previous video if you haven't. Today is going to be focused on Synastry again, but just from a different angle, a different point of view, and I just want to show you the significance and power of planets and asteroids making significant aspects to your partner's descendant, ascendant, and south node and north node. So those 4 points are very, very powerful points in the chart, especially when you're wanting to assess the relationship connections between any two people. Now, again, for the purposes of this video today, the main focus, central focus, is on love relationships. But I guess what you can keep in mind is that these principles can work in any kind of relationship. You're still able to use these principles. You may just vary the types of asteroids you use, for instance, simply because some of those won't be applicable in a love connection. In a friendship connection, or a father-daughter connection, mother-daughter connection, etc. Okay, well, let's begin. So today we're going to be looking at, as an example, it's always good to use an example of two people, just so that you can visually see what's going on in terms of the charts and synastry, and also just to have two people's charts there, so you can start to understand how these principles work and play out in a relationship. So I've chosen Victoria Beckham and David Beckham, another very famous couple, and I haven't spent a great deal of time on their charts. In fact, I literally just had a look at their charts just before I decided to sit down and do this video, and I don't know why my mind went to them. It's not like they're a couple that I think about or anything like that, but I was just, what flashed into my mind was, a couple that's been together for quite some time and are very strongly in the public eye and appear to have quite a strong connection. And when you look at the synastry for their chart, it's quite amazing actually, the links and the connections between asteroids, nodes, and personal planets. So before we look at their synastry chart, just a couple of things I would like to say. As I said, when you're assessing the connection between two people, there's quite a few different things to look at, but today I'm only going to focus on a couple of things, or a handful of things. Otherwise, it will just take too long to do this video, and I just want to do a fairly short video. So, the ascendant-descendant axis, that's primary in synastry. Why? Because the ascendant-descendant axis is the relationship axis. So naturally, that's going to be the primary axis that you're going to want to assess when you're looking at the relationship dynamics between two people and the connections, if any. You're also going to be assessing the nodes, the north and south node of the moon, and what you're wanting to assess with the ascendant-descendant, south node and north node is whether each person has a planet of theirs or an asteroid of theirs, an asteroid relating specifically to love and connection and soul connection and sexual passion and so forth. So it's a particular set of asteroids that you would use, which I'll tell you what they are in a minute, you're wanting to see that one person's asteroid or planet is hitting off the other person's ascendant, descendant, north node or south node. And in the case of Victoria and David, those 4 points are being hit off. So nodes and ascendant, descendant axes, very, very important. Just to give you an example, when you have, for instance, your partner's moon happens to be at, I don't know, 20 Leo, and your descendant happens to be, 18, 19, 20 Leo or thereabouts, then your partner's moon is forming what we call a conjunction to your descendant, and that's an incredibly supportive energy to have in the relationship. In short, it basically means that your partner offers you tremendous emotional support and security within that union, within that relationship. So it's a beautiful planet to have aspecting your descendant, your partner's moon. Equally would be Venus. Venus is a beautiful energy to have on your descendant. Your partner's Venus aspecting your descendant. It doesn't just have to be by conjunction, it can be by square as well, and opposition, and even trine, you could say. But I have noticed that conjunctions on the ascendant-descendant axis are super, super powerful. So Moon, Venus, Jupiter are all really beautiful energies to have supporting that descendant, that angle of the chart. That is your descendant, your angle, and vice versa. You're essentially, when you're looking at Moon, Venus, and Jupiter, they're all very soft energies and very supportive, empathetic, compassionate, generous, giving, loving, emotional connections, sensual, sexual connections. And the Jupiter would be a very strong, supportive, generous energy of abundance that comes into the relationship. So you really want to see Moon, Jupiter, Venus on the ascendant-descendant axis. That's the three main ones that I would say offer a lot in terms of energies that are supportive and loving and flowing and giving, and have an abundant sort of quality about them as well, particularly Jupiter. Now, the planets that I guess would be more challenging, obviously, would be planets like Pluto, Saturn, and Uranus. And you can even throw in Neptune. Now, because all planetary energies have various dimensions in their own archetypal meaning, in that every single planetary energy has various layers in terms of how it can manifest and play out. So given that, if we're talking about Neptune on the descendant, at a very high transcended level, that can be an incredibly powerful spiritual, divine kind of sense of union between the two people. That's at best. At worst, it can be complete disillusionment of what this union is actually about. So it can vary because it depends on the two individuals in question. It depends on the nature of the relationship. It depends on their level of consciousness and awareness, and how those energies are vibrating within each individual. So Uranus would be, that level of creating, I suppose, some sense of excitement, but it can also be an incredible destabilizer, because Uranus is not the energy that kind of glues things together. It kind of breaks things apart. So it's not the most favorable in relationship astrology, because it usually doesn't have that staying power to kind of create that groundwork that you need in a relationship. It stimulates a lot of excitement and a lot of, an energy that creates a lot of unpredictability and exploring the unusual and different things and so forth. And, you know, that's always, well, not always for everybody, but for a lot of people that can be incredibly stimulating and draw, you know, two people together. But is it a stabilizing factor to see the relationship in longevity? Not usually not. Now, Saturn, on the other hand, is exactly that. It is the planet that creates stability, longevity. It has a more serious tone to it, but it also implies some limitations and certainly some hard work along the way as well. But it does keep things together. It's a stabilizing force and energy. So again, you know, it just depends on the people, the couple, you know, the relationship, the nature of the relationship, the consciousness and awareness, you know, the evolutionary stage that somebody is in and so forth. There's a lot of different factors that need to come into play when you're assessing these sorts of dynamics and energies. So far I've just talked about, oh, well, we can throw in Mars and Mercury as well, just to kind of cover the inner planets. Mercury would just be simply an incredible, you know, mental connection between the two people. A lot of chatting, a lot of communication, a lot of sharing of ideas, a lot of just speaking about everything, wanting to just speak all the time. It's that, you know, it brings up that whole mercurial energy. Mars can be, you know, combative. It can be challenging because it can create conflict and tensions. It can also be the energy that describes the two people are very active. You know, they do a lot of they engage in a lot of physical activity together and things like that. So there's various ways these energies can play out, but just at a glance, if you see Mars on the descendant of your Mars on your partner's descendant, that can very, initially at least, it can be a very challenging aspect because it can potentially can create a lot of conflict. So the more softer, nicer energies that you really wanting to experience and see, I guess, would be the Venus, Moon, Jupiter. They're just a lot more supportive. The asteroids that you want to be looking for, there's several. First of all, because there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of asteroids, there's a strong possibility that your name is actually an asteroid. In some cases that won't be the case, but quite often there's because of the amount of asteroids there are, you'll find that your name is an asteroid, such as my name is an asteroid. Couple of my previous partners, their names happen to be an asteroid. Anyway, the point I'm getting at is this: if you can get your hands on an asteroid ephemeris that is that has quite an extensive sort of database of asteroids, you might be fortunate enough to find your name in those files or your partner's name. And it's very, very useful to look for that, because it seems to be that when there's an important connection between two people, it's not uncommon to find each other's names in the form of asteroids in each other's charts, hitting something off that's really, really important in terms of personal planet, the angles and the nodes. And this certainly is the case for David and Victoria, which I'll show you in a moment. So that's one thing. You can look for your names as being asteroids and see how they impact your partner's chart and vice versa. You're also wanting to be assessed Juno, you know, if it's a serious kind of commitment relationship that holds longevity and has a strong level of commitment to it, then you're wanting to see what Juno is doing via Synastry. So where is Juno in your partner's chart? Where's his Juno in your chart? Psyche, an asteroid called Psyche, is also a really beautiful asteroid to explore. She was an asteroid that represented basically soul love, a soul kind of union, and it's the lengths that one will go to in the name of love. So it's a psychic attunement with the other person that one feels about another. So if Psyche is prominent in your synastry charts, then that level, that archetypal energy of that deep love union, soul union, shows up very strongly. Although Neptune can point to that too, that this particular asteroid just adds another dimension to that. It's one of the highest forms of love, you could say, which is what Neptune ultimately is, because Neptune is the ultimate transcendent love that we could possibly experience, as opposed to the human love. Then I would also look at Eros, which is the asteroid connecting to sexuality, sexual energy, sexual connection, sexual attraction, passion, basically what turns you on. So if your Eros is significantly aspected to your partner's Mars or Venus, for instance, that's pretty good. That's a pretty strong sexual energy connection and attraction. So you want to assess where Eros is in your partner's chart and in each other's charts by synastry. I'll show you what this kind of looks like in a minute when I put up some charts. So Venus, Jupiter, Moon, aspecting the ascendant, descendant, beautiful energy, very supportive and very indicative of a very strong connection between two people. Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, and Saturn can also indicate very important connection. They just have a different level of frequency, and they are much more difficult to handle, the energies of those forces, that is. They pose a lot more challenges and require a lot more effort to work through. Whereas Moon, Jupiter, and Venus, it's effortless. There's this effortless flow and synchronicity and a feeling of safety, you could say, emotional safety, security, all of that. And then Eros is sexual energy component between two people. Juno is the more serious, committed level of union, and Psyche is the love psychic attunement between two people. So there's quite a few things there that you can get started with if you already haven't. And don't forget to look for your name in an asteroid ephemeris, because you may find that your name is an asteroid. And what you do with that is once you find the degree and sign that it's in when you were born, well, then you look at that in your partner's chart. Look, I'll show you with the visuals. That'll probably make it easier. All right, so let me just share my screen and get the ball rolling with some visuals. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a bi-wheel of David and Victoria. So this is a synastry perspective, okay? Because what we have is two birth charts. One in the inner wheel is Victoria Beckham. We know that because her name is up here on the left and it says inner wheel. So we know that that chart there belongs to Victoria, and the outer wheel belongs to David, and we know that because his name is up here on the right where it says outer wheel. Now, their times are probably fairly accurate. 10:07 a.m. and 6:17 a.m. sound a little bit more specific than 6:30 or 10:30, right? Where normally people just round things up. So that gives me a bit more confidence that their times are actually probably very close to these given times. I just found these times online. All right. So what I want to show you first is now this ascendant over here, which is at 13 degrees of Cancer, that's Victoria's ascendant. Okay. And what we have is David Beckham's Saturn conjunct her ascendant. Okay, so that's a very important connection right there. It's not an easy one, but it is a stabilizing factor. Remember, I said earlier that Saturn acts as a stabilizing force or glue in relationships or connections or situations in life, for that matter. It's what it, Saturn rules time. Saturn is chronos. Chronos is the Greek word for time. So, anywhere Saturn is, it usually implies that things take a long time to either work through, or there's a strong time component connected to this relationship, or a number of different things. But it is connected to time, longevity, and where hard work will be required as well. So anyway, that his Saturn on her ascendant is one important connection we can see immediately just with the visual eye right there. The next thing I want to show you is Victoria's south node is in Gemini at 21 degrees of Gemini. And what we have here is David's Venus is at 21 of Gemini, so it's exactly right on his south node. There's another very powerful connection in this relationship. And in this case, because we're talking about the south node, what we're essentially potentially looking at is a past life connection with these two people. Because it's Venus, it's probably been a very nice connection. Now, we'd need to delineate that further to get a more expansive picture, but just at a glance, without going into things too far, we can confidently say that that Venus on the south node is indicative that they've had some kind of love union in the past, because Venus is love and relationships, and the south node is the past. So his Venus on her south node, that's a very strong indication right there. Okay, now let me just get my bearings here. So her Venus, so Victoria Beckham's Venus, is at 11 degrees of Pisces, just up here. As you can see, that little blue symbol, Venus. If you look over here to the left-hand side, that is David's south node in Gemini. So her Venus squares his south node. Now, it is a wide square, I do agree. And for some, that may not count, but because of all these other connections that they have, I would possibly include it as an important part of the picture. Because when you're looking at a chart and you are trying to make a particular assessment of something, what you're essentially doing is you're building layers to create a story, or to invoke the story out of the layers. You're building a story out of layers. So it's never just one thing that describes one thing. It's usually multiple layers that build, something solid, that build a story. So because of that, because his Venus is on her south node, and there are other connections in their chart as well, such as Saturn on her ascendant, and some other things with the asteroids, which I'll point to shortly, I would consider that Venus square his south node as being part of the picture in this union. And, really all we need to do is look at basically the story of these two people, just as far as we have been allowed to view into their life on a public level. So there's so many things we don't know about them. We don't know the, the very private inner intricacies of their personal life on a day-to-day basis. And why should we? It's not our business really. But although it would be useful to have a little bit of insight about that, just from the point of view of assessing an astrological chart and synastry charts. But I guess what we do know for certain is that they've been together for a long time. They've got a few children together. They're pretty strong, regardless of a few little hiccups here and there that have come out in the media. Nothing has been really that substantial, because if anything was, they wouldn't still be together. And my understanding is that they are. And they're pretty young. They met when they were pretty young, so it's a pretty good effort on their part, given their status on the public arena, and the amount of money they've got as well. Those things can really get in the way of sustaining a relationship and a marriage, but they've managed to really keep it together, which I think is pretty awesome actually. So there's some connections there with Venus and both their south nodes. So that's a beautiful energy. It's very interesting to me that both their Venuses are aspecting their south node. So yeah, I would be inclined to think that they've had some kind of love union in a past life. That was very important too, such as the current one. The other things that I wanted to point to was if we look at David Beckham's Mars, it's actually square Victoria's south nodes. There's another hit again. Now this adds an entirely different layer, because Mars is certainly not Venus. Venus is love and Mars is war, to put it very simply. But there is another layer and dimension that would create further context and story of their past life connection. But for the purposes of what I'm demonstrating today, we just want to acknowledge that Mars is hitting off Victoria's south node, so there's another connection and indicative of past life as well. And these are all personal planets, Venus, Mars, personal planets, so that adds a real personal element and dimension to their story. So that's that. Now let me just see, was there something else with planets? Quickly scanning with my eyes, bear with me. Nothing with the remainder of the inner planets, that is Moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus. Let me just double check that. I'm just simply looking for any of those planets aspecting the south and north nodes, okay? All right, let's just leave it there. I may have overlooked something, because as I said, I didn't study this chart before I jumped on to do this video. I do things very spontaneously. I am very thorough though with the things that I point to. I just may not expand very much if I've just created this video in a spontaneous time, and this happens to be one of those times. Right, so now there's some further interesting things going on. I found the asteroid Victoria, and it is at 21 of Pisces, the asteroid Victoria, when David Beckham was born. So if you can imagine, 21 Pisces is somewhere here in the 10th house, just past her Venus. And what it does is forms an exact square to his Venus. Yes, that's right. So 21 Pisces square 21 Gemini. Okay, so there's another hit. Her own asteroid hits off his Venus. That's a pretty powerful connection. Her name, Venus, relationships. Okay, so there's another hit there. In addition to that, it's also conjunct her Mars. It is a wide conjunction, but you know it's there. And given everything else that we've been building, it would have relevance. So there's another hit. That's with the asteroid Victoria in relation to David Beckham's chart. Now, Victoria's Eros asteroid is at, I love this, it's at 10 degrees of Pisces, so it's conjunct his Mars. So there's another hit again with a very important energy, because it's the sexual energy that those two people share, that sexual connection. And you're talking about Eros, which is sexual energy. You're talking about his Mars, which is his sexual energy, and bang, they're right on each other. So there's clearly some strong sexual magnetic chemistry and energy between these two people, which helps when you're in a relationship. Okay. The other things that I noticed was that his Eros, which is at 6 degrees of Virgo. Now you can't see them in here because solar fire doesn't draw them into the chart. They're in files, and you just need to check the files and see, you know, what degree and sign they were in, and then you can just pencil it in. If you print out the chart, you can just pencil it in where it belongs. So in this case, I haven't done that. I'm just showing you with this cursor that I'm hovering around here, I'm just showing you where it would be placed. So his Eros is at 6 degrees of Virgo, which is placed just down here in his third house, and it's right opposite her Venus. So again, her Eros is on his Mars, and his Eros is on her Venus. So there's a lot of Mars-Venus exchange in this synastry chart between these two people. South Node, North Node, Venus, Mars, Eros on Mars and Venus for both of them. You know, a lot of Venus, Mars, intense energy between these two people, which, you know, must describe just the connection they have in this union, in this sexual relationship, just that raw kind of energy, you know, that emanates from both of them. It's exchanged equally between the two, so that it must feel really balanced for them in that way. It's not like one's pouring all that out and the other one's just taking it all and not giving anything. I feel that there's a real balance with these energies. They're both giving to each other on these levels, which is ideal, really. And what I found also was that his Psyche, the asteroid Psyche, is at 24 Aries, which is conjunct her Sun at 26 Aries. So see, that's Victoria Beckham's Sun at 26 Aries, and David's Psyche asteroid is at 24 Aries. Okay, so just imagine it's just sitting right there. That's pretty powerful. That's her Sun conjunct his Psyche. You know, the Sun is the central light and purpose of a person. It's a lot of other things as well, but having his Psyche on her Sun means that, you know, there's just this incredibly strong union, love, soul union between these two people. It's so powerful, just so powerful, all these different aspects that they have. I think I've covered their asteroids. Now, let's just have a quick look Well, you know, Juno, no, sorry, that's her Juno. This is Juno. Juno's at 27 Taurus. Um, yeah, Trident, her Uranus, but I, I sort of tend to look more at the inner planets, and I pay a lot of attention to planets on angles, especially the ascendant, descendant, when we're talking about relationship, astrology, synastry charts, and so forth. And, you know, look, I mean, his Mars is conjunct her midheaven. That's another powerful connection. That's him, you know, being a sports person, Mars, sports, athlete, driving actually her career. Her midheaven, quite interesting. Because he has been a very strong support and force behind her goals and her endeavors. I'm not saying she hasn't done anything in her own right. She has, but clearly that Mars, you know, is supporting something about her life path as well. Anyway, there's, as you can see, I just started to go into a whole different area then of the chart. So there are many things to dissect or to delineate from this chart. And this is just simply the synastry chart. When I say simply, I probably shouldn't say that, because the synastry chart is very telling, it's very powerful. And you can see from what I've pointed to today with their charts, there's a lot of direct hits, direct energy exchange between Mars and Venus. The two love, the two love principles, if you like, in relationships. You know, the masculine and the feminine coming together, uniting. They're the two primary masculine and feminine forces, quite apart from the sun and the moon. But, you know, Venus, Mars is really, they're the principles of relationships, especially when you're looking at the two together. And in this synastry, there's a lot of action, a lot of activity, which must have something to say about the fact that they've been together for so long and possibly have quite an intense union on a number of different levels. And, you know, look, Saturn there, I get the feeling that there's some difficulty with that at times, but overall it's also a very good stabilizing component. Okay, I'll just stop sharing my screen. So there was a couple of tips for you just to kind of give you a little bit more to work with and play around with. Always pay attention to planets on the south node and the north node. They will be very descriptive of the past life connections, south node. Planets on the north node will show which planetary energies, and therefore what style, what frequency will actually support each person on their north node path, their evolutionary path. So if your partner's moon lands on your north node, for example, then that's his moon is supporting your north node. You know, that's a pretty good connection there to have. Or if his Jupiter was there, or if Venus was there. Now, if Pluto was there, you know, that's indicative of, that's a real soul connection and support. Very, very powerful, dynamic, challenging, but can be supportive as well towards getting you towards your north node, and vice versa. So look, there's a lot of things that you would need to assess, and as I said, I wasn't going to cover everything today, but I just wanted to give you a few things to consider. So ascendant, descendant, very important. I would also be paying attention to the IC and MC, that axis. That's very important too, and perhaps I'll do another video and talk about why that IC, MC, 4th house, 10th house is important as well. But for now, just look at the ascendant, descendant. You want to see if any of your partner's planets are forming aspects to that axis, 1st house, 7th house. The energies that appear and feel to be more favorable and supportive. Venus, Jupiter, Moon, Neptune can be as well. You want to be looking at Psyche, who's the goddess or asteroid of psychic love, you could say. Eros, which is the sexual magnetic component, frequency energy between two people. What's that doing? Is that hitting things off? Juno, which supports a more committed kind of relationship. So what's she doing in the chart? And I think that's about it for now. The other thing that I wanted to just quickly say is, if you feel a really soul connection, it could be with your mother, it could be with your father, it could be with your brother or your sister, have a look and see if their name is an asteroid. And if it is, you look at it, so you put in your birth details. Let me just be clear on that. You'll punch in your birth details in an asteroid ephemeris, and there'll be a window there which enables you to select which asteroid you're wanting to see. So you put in the name and just try it, because it may or may not be there, but you won't know until you try. So I can tell you now that in my own life, the most important person in this incarnation for me has been my father. He's the person that I love more than anything and anybody in the entire universe and all the other universes. His name is an asteroid, and that asteroid happens to be exactly to the degree conjunct my ascendant when I was born. And I've always felt that, the connection between myself and my father is just this infinite soul connection that has no beginning and no end. And in esoteric astrology, the ascendant is the soul. So it's very interesting to just have a little look and see if there is somebody really important in your life, and if their name has been named after an asteroid, that's great, because if it is, then you can see where it is in your chart, what it aspects. It's going to be very telling. Demetra George, who is, she's like the queen for asteroids, and has done a lot of work on asteroids. She's written, Asteroid Goddess, the book Asteroid Goddess, and some other books on the luminaries as well. Anyway, she's very big on asteroids, and she's produced a lot of work, and she's looked at countless charts of famous people, and this method of when there's a very important, powerful union between two people, doesn't always mean that it's going to be a walk in the park. Most relationships are not a walk in the park. Some, have more of a flow, but there'll be things that come in that need our attention. They require our attention so that growth can be achieved. Needless to say, some relationships are more difficult than others. Let's just leave it at that. But when you are looking at an important connection between two people, when I say important or when I say soul union, it don't immediately imply that has to be, a walk in the park, all easy relationship. It can be one of the most challenging relationships of your life, but it can be one of the most important relationships of your life as well. So it just depends. So just keep an open mind with that. Yeah, okay. Leave it there. Thanks so much for watching and tuning in again. And as always, thank you for all your questions and comments. And I always do my best to respond as best as I can. Feel free to contact me for a reading, any type of reading you want, whether that's relationship astrology or whether that's life path, direction, change of residence, relocation, etc. And I'll do my best to support you and give you the guidance that you need. It has been just in terms of the present moment, where, in the eclipse season cycles, and we're 2 days away from the total lunar eclipse, which is at 4 degrees and 44 minutes of Aquarius. So there's a lot to be said about that. I know I said I was going to do a video and I haven't gotten around to it. These eclipses have been, very impactful for me as well in my own life. And just be mindful. Just be mindful that the frequencies are pretty intense at the moment with these eclipses going on, and they can be quite disruptive as well because Uranus and Mars is involved, particularly in this lunar eclipse coming up. But I think it's just important to check in with yourself and ground yourself and do things that support you through periods where you may feel decentered. Okay, all right, leaving it there and see you all soon. Thank you so much. Bye.